we're starting from kind of a different angle. I think one of the things that I've always appreciated about the Kansas Rural Center is the organization is built on a positive vision of food and farming systems. So we're talking about what can we do to build that more positive vision of food and farming systems here. So with that context, I'm really excited that we're going to be focusing for our keynote talk on cooperatives. When I was growing up, I had no idea what cooperatives were, except when I went to my grandparents, I could go to the co-op and get candy. I always really appreciated that. As I grew up, I learned more about them in my time when I lived in Minneapolis. Got to work for a couple of different co-ops up there and have really enjoyed that. So as a staff, we kind of get together and think about what should our next conference be about. And we decided cooperatives were a great opportunity for Kansas. A couple of our staff members were able to take part in trainings by Cooperation Works, and they said that Alex Stone would be a great keynote speaker to share that message with Kansas. After all of that, we decided we were going to do that. It's kind of like a thing of kismet. The Farmers Union got a big grant to expand cooperatives across Kansas and part of Missouri. So we're really excited to learn more about that project later, but to start off with a message sharing the value, the benefits, and the opportunities that cooperatives share for us. So I would like to introduce Alex Stone, who's the Executive Director of Cooperation Works. She's been involved in a number of different co-ops, student housing co-ops at the University of California, Berkeley, involved with the Berkeley Student Food Collective and served as operations manager, and has been working for a decade now as the Executive Director of Cooperation Works. So without any further ado, please join me in welcoming Alex Stone to the front.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome. How's everybody doing this morning?
Great.
Great. I heard there was a seed fair. How many folks went to that this morning? All right, a good number of folks. I know I appreciate the 10 a.m. start time, especially coming from the West Coast. So thanks for the local seed fair. And thanks so much for having me here today. As Tom said a couple of years back, some folks from the Rural Grocery Initiative and the Kansas SBDC took some of Cooperation Works trainings. And I'm pretty sure that they are the reason that I'm here today. So I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to them. And I'm glad to see that everybody survived February 13th, Friday the 13th. And also happy Valentine's Day. Yeah. And since it's Valentine's Day and Saturday, which means it should be a free day, and you are all spending your day here, I hope that you have something very special planned for your significant others when you get home tonight. I also want to thank the Kansas Rural Center for having me here today. I love the work that you're doing, and it's so important to have a voice for local farmers, sustainable practices in rural communities. And I'm excited to talk with you today about how cooperatives can be a strategy for rural resilience and sustainability. But before we dive in, I want to answer the question, who the heck am I, and just what am I doing here? Well, I was one of the lucky folks who found cooperatives and was bitten by the co-op bug early on. I saw a brochure for student housing cooperatives when I was touring my eventual college campus as a high school student, and I was smitten. I lived in those co-ops for 3 years, with no fewer than 55 housemates and as many as 149. Yeah, they were a fun few years. And through that community, I joined a group of students on campus who fought to keep Panda Express, which would have been the first national chain on campus, off campus. And we were successful in that at the time. This protest eventually turned into a fight for something. So we didn't want to just be fighting against, we wanted to be fighting for a better vision. And what that ended up being was a student-run, democratically managed grocery store that sourced food according to the Real Food Challenge guidelines. Food that truly nourished producers, consumers, communities, and the earth. It turned into a fight for student autonomy and ownership. It was a declaration that we should have a say, that our opinions mattered and our actions even more so. Within months, this group of students managed to fundraise over $100,000 to start the Berkeley Student Food Collective. And in less than 2 years, we opened a 600 square foot store. And this past November, the Berkeley Student Food Collective celebrated 15 years in business.
Wow.
Yes. Which I don't know if you're familiar with like campus business environments, but that's about a century in campus business years. And through this collective, thousands of students over the last decade and a half have been introduced to the cooperative business model. They've learned how to govern, how to manage inventory, read financials, engage in conflict, run educational programs, work with vendors, and be a part of the community. They've learned the importance of a sustainable food system and how, even as a member of a micro grocery store, 600 square feet is very small, they have a role in it. So I'll talk about these photos a little bit. This first one here is from the summer after we had received funding, but before we had a storefront. And we ran a weekly produce stand where we sourced from local farmers markets and then sold that produce at cost to the campus community. Hopefully you can understand why that piece didn't make it into the final business plan. The second photo is from when I spent some time woofing, which was volunteer organic farming, and tried to be a dairy farmer for a day. As you can see, I didn't feel great about milking cows, and there are about 10 more photos of me making that exact same face at different stages in the process. But that experience gave me a deep appreciation for the people who do this work day in and day out. And this third photo is from shortly after the Berkeley Student Food Collective opened in 2010. I was lucky enough to be hired as its first operations manager and brought it through its first 2 years of operations. Between woofing and managing the food collective, I co-founded the Cooperative Food Empowerment Directive, which started as an organization to train students on college campuses on how to launch student-run co-ops selling ethical, sustainable food. And though the Berkeley Student Food Collective emerged in an urban environment, it highlights the transformative power of the cooperative business model, which I will focus on today. Fast forward to now, I've been the Executive Director of Cooperation Works since 2016. Cooperation Works, or CW, is a national network of almost 40 members, organizational members, and 20 individual members, providing technical assistance, business support, training and education, and referrals to groups starting and growing cooperatives across the U.S. Our members work across cooperative sectors and on all ownership models. And as an organization, Cooperation Works plays 3 major roles in the field of cooperative development. We provide training and education to cooperative developers. So this includes a cross-sector training program called the Art and Science of Cooperative Development to train the next generation of cooperative developers. So that is what some of the folks who are in this room today attended a couple of years back. We also provide ongoing professional development for seasoned developers. We provide the scaffolding for a strong, connected, and well-resourced national network. We organize collaborations, provide opportunities to network, and strive to build trusting, productive relationships among developers. And finally, we work with national partners to educate policymakers on the importance of cooperatives. This includes, among other initiatives, supporting the Rural Cooperative Development Grant Program, which has enabled the incorporation of over 1,000 businesses and created or saved over 17,000 jobs just in the last decade. Awesome. It is awesome. This talk is about cooperatives as a strategy for rural sustainability. So I want to make sure that we all have a baseline understanding of what a cooperative is. Just off the bat, for folks in this room, how many of you are familiar with the model? All right, I just did not. That's great. Oh. So, according to the International Cooperative Alliance, the Global Apex Association for Cooperatives, a cooperative is an autonomous association of persons united voluntarily to meet the common economic, social, and cultural needs through a jointly owned and democratically controlled enterprise. That is a mouthful. Essentially, cooperatives are just a group of people who come together to collectively meet their needs. Dr. Jessica Gordon-Nebbard, author of Collective Courage, frequently reminds us that cooperation is humans' first form of economics. Cooperatives are values-driven, people-centered businesses. They should adhere to the 7 cooperative principles, which you can see here: voluntary and open membership, democratic member control, cooperation among cooperatives, autonomy and independence, member economic participation, concern for community, and education and training. They're not in that order. These are very out of order from how they're listed. And they also adhere to the 10 cooperative values, which include caring for others, democracy, equity, equality, honesty, openness, self-help, self-responsibility, solidarity, and social responsibility. They exist to meet the social, cultural, and economic needs of their members, and often, because of Principle 7, concern for community, and the cooperative values of concern for others and social responsibility, they take the needs of the communities in which they exist into account as well. These principles and values, the cooperative identity, are what make the model so transformative and empowering. So cooperatives have been an integral part of American society since before the founding of the United States. In 1752, Benjamin Franklin founded the first known cooperative in the 13 colonies, the Philadelphia Contribution Ship, a mutual insurance company for losses due to fire. And it still exists today. Since then, cooperatives have continued to meet the needs of communities excluded from private markets in all regions of the U.S. and in every sector. Though cooperatives are often seen as an alternative model, their role in our economy is robust. 30,000 cooperatives operate in over 65,000 locations across the U.S. that generate $660 billion in annual revenue and $25 billion in annual wages. And they employ more than 2 million people. And they operate in every sector of the economy. Over 100 million people in the U.S. collectively hold more than 350 million cooperative memberships. Are you one of them? If you know that you're a member of a co-op, raise your hand. All right. So that's a decent number, but when you're looking at 100 million, that's almost 1 in 3 people in the U.S. is a cooperative member. So we're gonna figure out why it is that there's that many people who are members of cooperatives. The model is still considered so niche. One thing is that we don't always know when we're a member. For instance, how many people live in any part of this map, which is not the white parts? And this is a map of Kansas, for anyone not familiar.
See it now.
Oh, wow. Not many people. This is a surprise. If you
What was the
live in any of the parts that are in color on this map.
Oh, and color.
All right. Well, congratulations. This is a map of the service area of Kansas Rural Electric Cooperatives. And that means you are a member of a rural electric cooperative and you get your power from one. So in Kansas alone, there are 26 energy and distribution cooperatives and 3 generation and transmission cooperatives. And as you can see, they provide energy to the vast majority of the state's territory. Bonus question for the folks who are members of rural electric co-ops, and this will be an easy one if you only just now realized you were a member of one. How many of you have ever voted in your rural electric cooperative's board election? All right, a couple. Hey, that's great. How many of you even knew or didn't know that you could, I guess? Didn't know. Some more hands. All right. Well, that is a conversation for a different keynote speech, but it is an important piece of information to keep in mind as we're thinking about the power of cooperatives and why they're not more well known. Another question, and I know that this is a texty slide. How many of you bank at any of these places? And I'll give you a second to read it over. You might not be able to read it from the back. Decent number. All right. Well, if you do bank at any of these, and maybe you'll find yours as I'm going through this, then congratulations. You are a member owner of a financial cooperative. One of 67 in Kansas, serving 1,178,140 members. That's about 42% of the population of Kansas. So in Kansas, more than 1 in 3 people is technically a member of a cooperative. And when we look to how cooperatives impact rural communities, their significance cannot be overstated. Going back to the rural electric cooperatives, or RECs, over 42 million people across the United States get their energy through one. That's about 12% of the population. As the name implies, these folks overwhelmingly live in rural areas. In the mid-1930s, about 90% of rural homes did not yet have electricity. Investor-owned utilities didn't think that these communities would be profitable. But in 1936, under the leadership of FDR, Congress passed the Rural Electrification Act, which provided loans, among other support, for rural people to create cooperatives and to build the infrastructure to get electrified. This program was an incredible success. Communities quickly came together to receive these 30-year loans and to build. And by 1959, just over 20 years later, over 90% of rural homes have electricity. And today, rural electric cooperatives have to fend off investor-owned utilities who want to get a piece of their pie. And of course, when we talk about co-ops and the impact on rural communities, we need to talk about ag cooperatives. Bolstered by the Capper-Volstead Act of 1922, which exempted ag co-ops from antitrust laws and in no uncertain terms enabled their survival, ag co-ops have a long, rich history in rural communities and in the story of the American food system. And yes, the Capper of Capper-Volstead is the very one that KSD's Cooperative Center is named after. So 30% of all agricultural products in the US are marketed by cooperatives. And one longtime former USDA cooperative development specialist estimates that 90% of food at your grocery store has touched a co-op at some point in the process. The impact of ag co-ops on our cooperatives is significant. Across the country, nearly 2 million farmers are members of nearly 2,000 ag cooperatives, though this number has been going down as co-ops consolidate. In 2024, they generated $275.8 billion in revenue and $8 billion in net income. They employ nearly 200,000 people. And ag co-ops are a tried and true model. 22% of ag co-ops in the US are over 100 years old, and 79% are 50 years old. That's huge.
Oh, actually.
Yeah, it's impressive. And with you all, I want to play a quick game. I have a slide full of brands, hopefully pretty well known to folks. Can anyone tell me which of these brands is not a cooperative? Give me a second to look them over. Any guesses?
I guess equal to saying. Just because I think it'd be a surprise.
You're guessing Equal Exchange is not a cooperative. Any other guesses in the room? All right, so we've got Equal Exchange, Simply Organic has the guesses out here. Anyone want to venture a third one?
We're yelling Sunbeam back here.
All right, that's Sunbeam. Well, I'm sorry to report, this is actually a trick question. Nobody saw that with me. All of these brands are cooperative. So Sunbeam is actually a brand of, I believe it's the Quality Bakers of America, which is a cooperative. And then Simply Organic is actually a brand of Frontier Co-op, which some people don't know. And Equal Exchange is actually a worker-owned cooperative, which is a little different than a lot of these others, which tend to be marketing cooperatives. So yeah, I hope that this demonstrates just the importance of ag co-ops in our economy. There are a lot of well-known household brands that are actually operating with a cooperative structure. Co-ops play a vital role in our food system in every step of the process, from farm to table. Farmers form cooperatives to buy feed and supplies in bulk so they can access them at affordable prices and stay competitive. They aggregate, process, distribute, and market their products together so they can access markets that they would otherwise be shut out of. Food co-ops provide healthy, local food to their communities. The National Cooperative Grocers has found that food co-ops on average have 175 local vendors compared to 41 for conventional grocers. 37% of their sales are organic compared to 3% for conventional grocers. And 24% of food co-op sales are local products compared to just 2% for conventional grocers. And as we're talking about food co-ops, I do want to make sure to give a shout out to the Merck, which is the local food co-op here in Lawrence, and they have been around for over 50 years, which again speaks to the durability of this model. And so this is just a little graphic that we created with NCW to sort of have a pictorial representation of all of the places that food co-ops can plug in. And I'm not going to read this list right now. I believe you'll have access to my slides later, but this is just a quick highlight of all of the different ways that cooperatives might be a part of the food system, generally starting with sort of who owns it. So producer co-ops are owned by the producers, consumer co-ops owned by the consumers, and so on and so on. So feel free to dig into that slide a little more later. So in previous slides, I laid out the impacts of two of the largest and oldest cooperative sectors, both of which received significant government support and evolved under a favorable regulatory environment. Today, ag co-ops and rural electric cooperatives comprise 69% of the National Cooperative Bank's Co-op 100 list, which compiles the co-ops generating the most annual revenue. But cooperatives operate at all scales and carry meaningful impacts for their member owners, whether they're a local single branch store, a regional network, or a national powerhouse. So I want to explore 3 examples of the transformative power of cooperatives in rural communities and highlight how shared ownership and values-driven business can sow the seeds of resilience. So I'm going to first turn our attention to Walsh County, North Dakota. This county is home to just north of 10,000 people over a 1,300 square mile area, about 8 people per square mile. Like many rural areas, grocery stores in North Dakota have been struggling with population decline and limited options for distributors and suppliers. The average U.S. grocery store has weekly retail sales of $320,000. In rural North Dakota, this is $20,000. Grocery stores in rural North Dakota have had a really hard time. 29% of their rural grocery stores have shuttered in the last decade. The grocery stores in Walsh County found that distribution was a key pain point. Though several distributors might service a town, deliveries might be completed infrequently, making consistent stocking difficult. Small orders meant sky-high prices, and there were often limited selections available to these stores as well. Enter the Rural Access Distribution Cooperative. Those solutions-oriented ideas have been tossed around since 2014. This project really got underway when the state legislature passed a bill in 2019 requesting that the state study the rural grocery sector. They explored a shared services cooperative with a hub and spoke approach where multiple stores would order together from one distributor and the largest would serve as a local distribution center. By ordering together and pooling their resources, they would save money, even with the additional cost of getting the supplies from the hub to the spokes. Usability analysis indicated that each store would save about $10,400 a year. That may sound small, but this was impactful given that the average profit margin of a rural store in the area was $18,200. The co-op started with 3 main goals. 1, improve economic viability of participating grocery stores, and they started with 3. 2, provide cost savings to grocers that could be passed on to consumers. And 3, improve the selection and variety of items offered. The co-op incorporated in 2021 and has been operational for several years. The model appears to be sustainable, though it did require grant funding to get started. And while the co-op is performing well financially, it's important to emphasize that the value of RAD co-op on these communities goes far beyond that. When a local school lost its distributor during COVID, the cooperative was able to step in as the new distributor, ensuring that food was available to students during a national crisis. Entities like RAD Cooperative help ensure a rural grocer's survival, which in turn can ensure the survival of entire rural communities. Interviews with key stakeholders of the RAD Cooperative reveal that it has met or exceeded just about all expectations, and it has added benefits through improved technology, like a new point of sale system, and customer engagement, like online ordering. RAD Cooperative demonstrates the creative solutions cooperatives can provide to local food businesses in rural communities. And this is just a couple infographics from their website. So you can see for purchasing, schools and potentially other local entities can order through their local grocery stores. Those grocery stores on ordering together through what ends up being the hub, the Park River Grocery, order through UNFI, delivers to that one store. And then that one store has set up a distribution channel to get it to the grocery stores who can get it back to those schools. And yeah, if you want to learn more about this, I have a link to a white paper on the RAD Cooperative below. So you can read that 33-page paper and dig into all the details. Now we're going to fly across the country to Meadville. It's a small but lively town of 13,000 people in Northwest Pennsylvania. Nicknamed Tool City because of its history as a strong manufacturing economy with a specialty in tooling, precision machining, and advanced manufacturing, which it is still a leader in, Meadville has experienced many of the same challenges shared by industrial towns. They face high property taxes, a shrinking population, business closures, and an aging housing stock. So what did they do? They've turned to the cooperative model to spur local economic growth, train the workforce, preserve local ownership, and build community wealth. The Meadville city government began this process with a listening initiative in 2015. Since then, Cooperation Meadville has emerged as a local workforce and economic development initiative. They provide training, education, and technical assistance to local residents, civic leaders, and businesses in Meadville. They've partnered with Keystone Development Center, a co-op development center serving Pennsylvania and much of the Mid-Atlantic, to implement this program. Unfortunately, one of the people leading Cooperation Meadville used to work for KDC, Cooperative Keystone Development Center, and is on the Meadville City Council, so that really helps. And today, Meadville boasts a number of co-ops, including a cooperative preschool, an artist cooperative, and a real estate investment cooperative. These provide affordable childcare, a studio space and gallery space for local artists, and a community-owned real estate portfolio that supports locally owned, place-based businesses. And delightfully, one of the first businesses to enter their building, you can actually see a photo of it there, is a meadery, which I think is just perfect for a town called Meadville. And they have a budding partnership with budding partnership with a shared service cooperative that can support the rehabilitation and development of affordable housing through worker-owned construction companies. So stay tuned on that. This could be a very interesting partnership and also possibly be the basis of something that could be expanded nationally. So that's just a little teaser, and keep your eyes on Meadville. Though Meadville doesn't provide an explicit example of cooperative supporting farmers in the local food system, it does demonstrate the flexibility and breadth of the cooperative model and how it can be used to address the needs of rural communities and build community wealth. Meadville was one of a handful of cities across the U.S. to formally declare 2025 the year of the cooperative, along with the International Cooperative Alliance. So I'm going to take us back out west now to explore a regional cooperative model to support local growers and a sustainable food system. The Northwest Food Hub Network consists of 3 food hub cooperatives, one in Puget Sound, Washington, one in Spokane, Washington, and one in Missoula, Montana. While they were informally collaborating for years, in 2019, they formally joined together under the banner of the Northwest Food Hub Network. This network gives small farmers access to markets across the Pacific Northwest. It enables each food hub to serve larger customers. If one food hub is running low on a particular product, whether due to demand, seasonality, or local growing conditions, they can tap the other network members to try to fill in the gaps. And though each farm still operates independently, the network enables them to reach the region's customers through one single point of contact. This significantly eases the customer experience, but the network doesn't erase the individual farmers themselves. Indeed, the website lifts up the individual farms with information and stories. They always trace their food back to the source and can tell you exactly which of the 200 farms it came from. The Northwest Food Hub Network and its member food hub co-ops are shining a light on the path to survival and resilience for small farms in the face of corporate consolidation, the incursion of monopolies, and the policies that favor big ag. So these were all examples of how cooperatives support rural resilience through collective ownership and democratic governance. But a beloved saying in the co-op world is, if you've seen one co-op, you've seen one co-op. They're infinitely flexible. As values-driven, people-centered enterprises, this model can be adapted nearly endlessly to meet the needs of its member users. So I want to highlight a few more examples just to demonstrate the breadth of how co-ops can be used. The Cooperative Development Foundation launched the Home Care Cooperative Initiative about a decade ago, with the goal to support the creation of 25 new worker-owned home care cooperatives. They met this goal, and these co-ops are incredibly important in rural areas where quality care may be further away and significantly more expensive. Home care co-ops provide affordable care for patients and higher wages, better working conditions, and more comprehensive training for workers. There are home care co-ops in rural communities across the U.S. And within the CW network, we've seen some really interesting collaborations. Within the last couple of years, the Northwest Cooperative Development Center, which is in Washington, actually partnered with the Nebraska Cooperative Development Center to bring this model to Nebraska. And if you do a quick Google search online, you can find some news articles about what's happening now in Nebraska as these are getting off the ground and getting started and making an impact. The Pecuni Cooperative is on the Blackfoot Reservation in Montana. It's a multi-stakeholder cooperative focused on food sovereignty and sustainability. They aim to preserve Blackfoot lifeways and cultural traditions through the production of tea, with members of the Blackfoot Nation joining as producers, consumers, and bulk purchasers. In the Pecuni Cooperative, we see people coming together to meet economic, ecological, and cultural needs. Feed Cooperative is another food hub network, but this one is located in California. It supports 60 farmers in the North Bay area. They are a multi-stakeholder co-op with both farmer and employee owners. And Feed is focused on building a sustainable local food system that empowers local farmers. And this was also a conversion. So it started with sole proprietorship and he ended up selling to the farmers. I think was one of the farmers for a bit as well, because he saw the need for a cooperative in this space. Next, we have resident-owned communities, or ROCs. And across the U.S., these empower residents of manufactured housing communities to purchase the land under their homes, taking the land off the speculative market, which has been a playground for private equity in recent years, exploiting vulnerable communities for the financial gain of outside investors. ROCs create long-term, stable, affordable housing, preserving these important communities. And ROC USA has supported the creation of 357 communities in over 24,000 homes. So these are folks who are really at risk of having their rents jacked up, of potentially getting evicted for private equity, and these communities are putting that power back into the hands of the residents. There's a great story of I believe it was a ROC in Texas, perhaps in the Houston area, that was in a really flood-prone area. And after the residents bought their park, they were actually able to make long overdue infrastructural improvements to the property that had been, a lot of the areas prone to floods. This particular park was. They actually did all the infrastructure improvements to make it more weather and flood resilient. And when the next flood came, they were okay. This would never have been done under an owner that did not live in that community. It wasn't profitable for them. But the residents of that community understood the importance of making these improvements together. The New Roots Cooperative Farm is a producer co-op whose member owners are new Americans, mostly from Somalia. This farm has given these recent immigrants economic security, access to community, and a way to preserve the culture through foodways. And it's located in Lewiston, Maine. And finally, inspired by the Madrigal model in Spain, the Industrial Commons is located in Morganton, North Carolina. They are a community-owned manufacturing business that builds resilient businesses and produces worker agency and addresses environmental issues. They do this through cooperative development, network development, workforce development, and community engagement. And they've been really successful. Since 2015, the Industrial Commons has trained 5,039 workers. They've generated nearly $100 million in revenue and assets, and they've supported 577 businesses. Industrial Commons is leading the way for small towns to reclaim their industry and economy in a sustainable and equitable way. The cooperative model is being adapted and creatively applied to address a diverse array of challenges faced by communities across the U.S. In rural areas in particular, co-ops can provide the necessary scale for local businesses, whether small sustainable farms, community-owned grocery stores, or worker-owned enterprises to succeed. And after learning the myriad examples of cooperatives building collective power and resiliency in rural communities, I'm sure that you're all wondering what you can do to bring this model to your community. Well, I am so glad you asked. I'm going to go through a few ways that you can help co-ops thrive in your area. So first, make some noise. As with many beloved and impactful programs, federal programs supporting cooperatives are at risk of being cut based on what Tom brought up in his introduction. I know Kansas is feeling these strains as well. The Rural Cooperative Development Grant Program has provided the only federal funding dedicated to cooperative development for the last 30 years. These funds have supported the development of thousands of businesses, created or saved tens of thousands of jobs, and supported co-op training and education for thousands, tens of thousands of people in rural communities. Though Congress has appropriated funds for the continuation of the program, this is bipartisan, it's generally appreciated, supported, people know the importance of it. Delays under this administration have threatened its survival. Making senators and members of Congress aware of this program and its impacts was crucial in making these funds available in 2025, and it will likely be equally important this year. The Work Act, which was passed in 2023 as a means to support worker ownership through ESOPs and worker cooperatives. Just last week, Congress appropriated $2 million for the first time to go to state employee ownership centers to provide technical assistance for conversions and worker ownership. The co-op community has also spent years trying to get the Small Business Administration to make 7A loans accessible to cooperatives. Cooperatives' unique ownership structure make the requirement of a personal guarantee untenable. Other government agencies, including the USDA, have long made successful, overwhelmingly successful loans to cooperatives without this requirement. The Main Street Employee Ownership Act 2.0 is a key lever in moving the needle on this. These are all federal programs that you can talk to your Congress folk about. You can also explore what state cooperative statutes and local policies might support cooperatives in your area. California only passed a worker co-op statute in 2016, making it easier for this type of cooperative to incorporate under a statute that makes sense for their business model. Tenant and worker opportunity to purchase laws, often called TOPA, provide an opportunity for conversions to housing and to worker cooperatives. There are many other local policies you can advocate for to create a favorable environment for co-ops to thrive. Your voice as a constituent is powerful. Educating your elected officials about cooperatives and the programs and policies that support them is a critical part of strengthening local and national cooperative ecosystems. Next, you can get trained. Another critical element of a strong cooperative ecosystem is skilled cooperative developers. And Principle 5 also reinforces the importance of training, education, and information. As I shared earlier, Cooperation Works holds the art and science of cooperative development, which is an intensive cross-sector training program for new developers. Some cooperative development centers hold co-op academies and training the trainer programs. And there are also some opportunities in higher education. St. Mary's University in Canada houses the International Center for Cooperative Management and offers a master's in management, cooperatives, and credit unions. Essentially a co-op MBA, but also so much more than that. And the Cooperative Development Foundation also has an 8-month fellowship for new cooperators called the Cooperative Leaders and Scholars Program. And they will actually provide a stipend to you to go through that program. I believe the deadline on that just actually closed, but if you're interested, stay tuned for it next year. Everyone has gone through it, just gushes about it. CW board member Craig Methicott summed up the importance of training beautifully. He said, for cooperators who are trying to successfully steward their co-op and are facing challenges, the opportunities where they are provided training, education, and information are the most energizing and hope-building things that occur. People get reminded of what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how they want to be. Next, you can partake in a time-honored co-op tradition, the study group. Notably, study groups and reading circles have been an important part of African American cooperative history, with groups educating themselves and holding discussions to learn the cooperative model and how it could be applied to help them meet economic, social, and cultural needs. These are great ways to build community, to forge strong relationships, to learn about cooperative histories and models, and have deep conversations about cooperative economics. And if you don't know where to start, there's a ton of great books. You might start with Collective Courage by Dr. Jessica Gordon-Lombard, which will provide a deep dive into African American cooperative history. And we'll also talk about the importance of study circles. John Pearl's For All the People will provide a centuries-long understanding of the cooperative movement in the U.S. and how it has affected labor, civil rights, and other solidarity movements. Weavers of Dreams by David Thompson will give you the needed context behind the Rochdale Pioneers, a cooperative credited with creating a list of principles that would eventually become the basis for today's cooperative principles. The possibilities are endless. If you have any questions, if you want to talk co-op folks, come to me after this. I can give you a whole list. Tell me what you want. There's so many good options out there. And finally, you can get plugged in. So co-op principle 6 is cooperation among cooperatives. And CW actually has our own set of principles for cooperative developers. And our principle 7 recognizes that co-op developers should help build the movement. Much how a cooperative builds power through the collective action of individuals, the cooperative movement can build power through co-ops joining together in networks. These can be networks that help them achieve scale, give them access to markets, or create cooperative value chains. They could be sectoral associations like the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association or National Cooperative Grocers, which can be the voice of a sector. They might be local networks that help co-ops connect, access local funds, and build a public presence. And you can always be a member of multiple networks. For instance, there are many worker cooperatives that might be a member of their hyper-local worker co-op network in the Bay Area. It's called No Boss, network of worker-owned cooperatives. Bay Area worker-owned cooperatives. But then they might also be a member of the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops, which represents worker co-ops on a national scale. And then they might also be a member of the National Cooperative Business Association, which is the apex order for co-ops in the U.S. But these are all kind of long-term attempts to get co-ops started in your community. And if you have been really excited today, you might be wondering what you can do right now. And this joke was so good that I just had to use it. And I am excited to let you all know about homegrown prosperity. This was not planned. This just happened to be line up its kismet. This is a rural cooperative development initiative. It is funded by a 2-year grant from the Patterson Family Foundation, and it's a joint program led by the Kansas Farmers Union, the Missouri Farmers Union, Common Ground Producers and Growers, and the National Cooperative Business Association. This program will provide education, outreach, and technical assistance with the goal of supporting 10 co-op-ready groups in Kansas and Missouri over the project period. Not only can you learn more by whipping out your phones and clicking on that QR code, I believe that Nick of the Kansas Farmers Union, Tom of the Missouri Farmers Union, and Donna of Common Ground are here today. So are you guys in the room right now? All right, got one there, one there.
You'll learn more about this at 12:30.
Excellent. Thank you for that plug. If this talk has piqued your interest, if you're thinking about co-ops and it's just making your heart rate spike a little bit with excitement for how it can help your community, make sure you find one of them to talk about this program and how you can get plugged in. This is, again, pretty wonderful that it's happening right now, that it overlaps with this conference, and I'm really excited to get to introduce it here today. So I'll leave you with this. This is a challenging time, and I am sure that our children's children will be in history class one day, scratching their heads and wondering what the heck was going on. But cooperatives can provide a pathway forward. We live in a system that frankly would rather have us go it alone. Individual farmers have much less negotiating power when it comes to the cost of supplies or access to markets. A single resident of a manufactured home park cannot access the capital needed to purchase the land under their park. A lone worker will have a challenging time advocating for higher wages and better working conditions. But cooperating gives us collective power. In a system that promotes and even mandates individualism, choosing to cooperate with one another to meet our needs is an act of resistance, and it is what this moment requires. Some of the world's strongest cooperative economies, notably in Spain and Italy, have emerged from, and importantly, because of turbulent and violent political environments. Choosing to share resources for the collective good make us more civically minded citizens. Studies have found that co-op members are more likely to vote and more likely to join civic organizations. Co-op members are inherently connected to their communities and attuned to shared solutions. Being a member of a cooperative requires us to make decisions as a group, compromise, to practice democracy regularly, as producers, as workers, as consumers, and as residents. It's no wonder that cooperators bring that ethos and skill set into the broader community. In a world of rapidly consolidating corporate power, as the speaker at the last conference discussed at this conference, Cooperatives provide a path for communities to maintain ownership, to build a skilled workforce, preserve important local businesses and institutions, and assert that we are, in fact, stronger together. Cooperatives build economies that work for communities. I hope that as you explore sustainable solutions for your farm, your local businesses, and your communities, that you include the cooperative model in all its delightful, juicy complexity and as a cornerstone for cultivating a resilient, thriving rural America. Thank you so much for listening to me here today and for having me here. I'm so happy to talk about all of this with you. And I think we have some time for Q&A.
Yeah. Let me see if I can do this without getting a lot of feedback. Yeah, if people have questions, raise your hand. I can run out there with the mic. Don's gonna make me run the whole way.
Thank you, Tom. I just wanted to point out that we have something fairly unique here in Kansas, which is Blue Valley Telecommunications, which is a cooperative that services a pretty good sized part of northern Kansas. And we've been blessed with fiber optic cable right into our homes. So there's a lot of different co-ops out there, and we don't want to forget Blue Valley.
Thanks for that.
Other questions?
It should be good.
Okay.
Can you speak a little bit more to those statutes you mentioned, the Work Act and the Main Street Act?
Sure. What do you want to know about that?
What would they actually do on the ground for co-ops?
Yeah, so the Work Act, gosh, it's a little complicated, but basically it, to start with, is only getting money to state employee ownership centers. And it's just providing money for them to actually do the technical assistance and the education. Mostly probably for conversions. A lot of the Department of Labor focuses more on ESOPs than worker co-ops, although there's been recently a lot more enthusiasm for worker cooperatives, and until the last year that shifted a little bit. And so it actually, when it was written, passed with $15 million going out over 5 years. Nothing got appropriated in 2024. Nothing got appropriated in 2025. So it was the first year of appropriations was supposed to be 4 million. But you know what? In this day and age, getting the 2 million appropriated for a new program is a massive win. And it's not that much money. It will probably only go to a few centers to start out with, but it is supposed to increase every year as they learn, as there's more interest. But yeah, for right now, we'll go to state employee ownership centers, and it will basically provide funding for their work to support conversions, and potentially just the creation of new worker ownership businesses, which again is worker co-ops, and ESOPs are employee, oh my gosh, stock ownership plans. There we go. And then the Main Street Employee Ownership Act 2.0 is a follow-up. Basically in 2018, the first one of those passed. It directed the SBA to find a way to support cooperatives and to make the 7A loans available. The SBA basically came back and they're like, it's impossible, you don't want to do it. And so the second version of the act is a way to basically force their hand a bit more. They need to look into it, and we're hoping to move the needle on that, but continued pressure of emphasizing the importance of cooperatives, and why that personal guarantee doesn't make sense for them, that there are other department agencies that have found a way to do this. The USDA, again, has just been making loans without personal guarantees to cooperatives for decades, and it's been fine. Those loans have worked out really well. So it's pretty wild right now that the Small Business Administration basically has flatly refused to even consider this. So it's really just applying pressure to that case.
There we go. Says it, nearly a senior citizen. Have you ever seen co-op apply to retirement communities or senior housing or assisted living facilities? Because the landscape in that housing situation is just, dismal in terms of corporate structure.
Yeah, there are certainly senior housing co-op communities. I know on the Rock website, they actually do even have a little tab. You can go and explore 55 plus communities. And there are a number of senior housing co-ops across the country. I know Minnesota has a couple. There's one that comes to mind in Montana. So yeah, there are definitely models you can explore for that. And yeah, I think it's incredibly useful. And it gets applied differently in different areas. There are, sometimes in these rural communities, there might be people who've lived in the home they raised their family in for 50 years, and it might be way more than they need, but it's actually financially challenging to sell the house and to downsize. And so co-ops can provide basically an affordable way to do that and then free up this larger house potentially for like the new families who want to increase the availability of housing stock.
What kind of issues have you run into working with county authorities to set up a food co-op in rural?
I am not sure about that one. To set up to like a food co-op grocery store.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, just unifying the local growers and everything. Because one of the things that we're running into in the county that we live in, and the county commissioners have even said something about it, like there is what they call food desert
Yeah.
where we're living. And so two of the grocery stores that we have in the smaller communities out, we have small towns in our county have closed down. So now older folk, retirement communities and such as that's back within the county now have to journey to the next county over or the next two counties over just to be able to get the food that they need. And this isn't exactly nutritious food either. As we all know, that type of cropping just doesn't promote good nutrition. So I was just curious, like, you had spoke about North Dakota. I thought that was really cool. The fact, I mean, not cool, like what they went through, but the problems that they had and the problem solving that they went through in order to get what they needed. How can that be applied to another rural community?
Yeah, well, I think that there's a lot of different options that communities can turn toward. So, Brad Co-op, I mean, I guess there have been probably distribution cooperatives, but they were heralded as like kind of the first of their kind. They got a lot of attention for that. And so their approach, right, they identified the pain point as distribution, and they created a solution to address that. There can be other issues, and it's going to vary town to town. I know there are some areas where, like, even a traditional food co-op model doesn't necessarily make sense, where you have, consumer members or worker owners or some combination of the two. Some of them have to be just fully like community-owned grocery stores, and they might even operate with some volunteer labor. That's obviously not ideal, but I know that there have been a couple of towns that have pursued that. And then these aren't actually all cooperatives, though this person in the center does do a lot of cooperative development, and it makes sense. They'll definitely promote that. That's Sean Park, the Illinois Institute for Rural Affairs at Western Illinois University, has been working on basically like micro rural grocery stores. Like, these are also very small stores that can provide, good food, fresh produce to communities, but they kind of defy the traditional logic of, a grocery store needs to be however large. And they're saying, actually, if it goes super small, that's going to be more sustainable and economically viable. So there are a lot of options. It really depends on the challenges that your community faces. And I mean, when we're looking toward more traditional, like full-size food co-ops, frankly, it is a lot of cash to get them started. I think years ago, Food Co-op Initiative used to say that you should have about $1 million before you launched and starting your cooperative. And now I think there's like $2 million, but again, that's full size. It's probably not appropriate to a lot of smaller communities. And so I think just staying flexible with what will best address your community's needs. I haven't necessarily heard of like county authorities standing in the way of creating new food co-ops. If there's anything specifically coming up or it's been a challenge, I'd love to hear. Yeah, does that answer your question? Roughly? Ish?
More questions?
Could you speak about the role of building, consciously building individual and collective agency among those wanting to form a co-op and their members, would-be members? And does that tie into the study groups?
I think it could, and like I've said, that our model is incredibly flexible, so it's really whatever you need. If you're working with a group of folks that you want to eventually be cooperative owners, and you're, for instance, starting a study group, you could pick folks that, you know, do explore individual and collective agency. I think that that's also a piece of the training and education and just introducing people to the model, understanding the different ownership structures, how they plug in. I think getting trained really on democratic decision making and cooperative governance is also key. A lot of us are not we're not trained to make decisions together. Again, our society doesn't really foster collectivism exactly. So I think being intentional about seeking training on those things that are challenging is a really important piece. And I'll also highlight just with that question that on Cooperation Works YouTube, we are slowly building out a library of free resources that we're calling our Equity Hub. So right now we have a video that's been up for a couple of years on various cooperative movements in the US, which I think could be a great primer just for introducing folks to the model, for how they can understand and plug in what co-ops can do for them. We recently, and this is less about collective or individual agency, but this summer we got one up on an introduction to financial analysis. And we are about to put one up called governance that introduces it, and then a couple of ways of going about it.
Well, I wonder if sometimes the grant programs and the co-op development agencies create the expectation that these people are going to do the hard work for the co-op members and developers. So people that are done have to make it work.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we're looking at cooperative development, there's a wide range of what that looks like. And so it goes anything from low touch, which could be the case. Like I'll share, for instance, the Berkeley Student Food Collective. Like we didn't actually know what the heck we were doing back then. We were a very low touch co-op. I think the California Center for Cooperative Development might even have reached out to us and we're like, no, we got it. But something I've shared about that is there was a bunch of folks coming from student housing cooperatives, and that was the only model that a lot of us had. And then complicate that in the Bay Area, for some reason, all of the food co-ops are worker owned, which is not how it is in most of the country. And so we knew how we operated in these housing cooperatives. We knew a little bit about the local co-ops, and we kind of knew about like Park Slope. But I don't think we had a coherent idea of sort of consumer versus worker owned. And we ended up coming up with like a real weird hodgepodge. And actually, the food collective is called a collective rather than a co-op because it's actually a nonprofit, but it is still democratically governed. So that was, I think, an instance of, you know, people who came together, did all the learning themselves, really pieced it together, happened to work out, low touch, really kind of no touch co-op development. And then there are groups who might need like a lot more support through the process. They might need someone to be really hands-on when they're creating their bylaws, and not to write it for them. You want them to create their bylaws, but they might need to really be walked through the process. For some worker cooperatives, particularly with communities that maybe have been historically marginalized and disenfranchised, you might have the co-op developer even sit on the board for the first couple of years just to make sure that they're keeping it moving. So it's just a wide range. But yeah, I think regardless of how you're approaching it, co-op developer wants to be intentional about ensuring that the co-op is by and for the members, that it's serving them, that it's meeting their needs, and that at every step of the process, they are building the skills, knowledge, and experience of the members of the cooperative so that they can run the show on their
Got a couple of things for you, but the first was your Work Act and the Main Street Employers Act. I'm sure if we brainstormed, we could come up with 100 different companies in the last 50 years that started in small communities. And when the owner retired, they were gobbled up by somebody big. Which these kinds of, ownership acts would hopefully be set up to educate the employees and allow them to buy in. So was that the justification?
as a way to educate the employees themselves. That very well may be a part of the act, and whether or not really it's providing funding for the technical assistance, and often in the process, unfortunately, often when conversions happen to employee ownership, the very first person who has to be the contact and who reaches out is generally the owner, because if they're not going to agree to sell it, it doesn't matter how educated that workers are on it, but it is really important also to provide education to the potential workers, especially once you are pretty sure that the owner will sell, and also to cultivate like an ownership mentality of the employees, because it's really different to be an employee of a business versus an owner, and especially one of potentially many owners. And so, the education piece is really important. Again, this funding is not a ton to start with, but ideally some of it would also go toward broader education. And a lot of the folks that are working on conversions, whether to ESOPs or hopefully to worker cooperatives, Project Equity, the Democracy at Work Institute, a lot of our co-op development centers that serve entire states, like within the CW network, they are working on producing the educational materials to actually ensure that both owners and workers know that this is even an option. For a lot of people, they don't even know that they could convert, and overwhelmingly retiring business owners don't have a succession plan. A huge part is just an increasing awareness, and certainly we would hope that both the Work Act and the Main Street Employee Ownership Act would help to increase awareness as well.
I guess I'm thinking if there was some kind of a resource pamphlet or something that we could, you can identify in your communities people that are 55 years old and they're going to retire in 10 years. And if they have that information up front, they can at least consider it.
Yeah.
Because you're right, the owners are the ones that control everything.
Unfortunately, to start with. Some of those organizations that I mentioned, especially Project Equity and Democracy at Work Institute, and probably the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops, are all going to have some of those resources. And if you have a co-op development center in your area, it's very likely that they have some kind of one-pager or pamphlet that you might be able to provide as well. But this is an ongoing conversation, and it's something folks in the movement are actively working on, is how do we build the pipeline? I think right now, whether it's conversions or startups, often cooperatives, as people are thinking about business structure, are sort of at the bottom of the list. It's sole proprietorship won't work, an LLC won't work. How do we do that? And then they get to co-op when they can't figure out another way to make it work. And one of our goals moving forward is to make it so that folks are aware of the cooperative models, and ideally that it's much higher up on that list, that it's something that they actively pursue.
You mentioned Cooperative Development Center. Do you know where the closest one in Kansas or close to Kansas is?
There is not one that's a member of our center currently. We, a couple of years back, the Rural Grocery Initiative was a member of Cooperation Works. They're developing rural groceries. They're not exclusive to cooperatives, but they sent a bunch of people through our training with the idea that they could bring that model back. And I think, Tom, do you have any information on Kansas in particular for co-op development centers?
We don't have one. So there is the Arthur Capper Center at K-State that does, they're not a cooperative development center. They do some support for that.
seems mostly geared towards large agricultural co-ops in my experience. But there is, Rocky Mountain Farmers Union has one in, Denver.
Yep.
Yeah, and then I think University of Nebraska also has a nice cooperative development that I've used resources from before, so.
Yeah, and those are both members of the Cooperation Works Network, so none that I know of right in Kansas, but definitely in neighboring states. There are a number of these entities. Also in Colorado, although these are more focused on the Metro Denver area, we have Center for Community Wealth and the Rocky Mountain Employee Ownership Center. And then going back to Nebraska, the Center for Rural Affairs is also starting to do cooperative development. They partnered with the Nebraska Cooperative Development Center quite a bit, and they also recently joined the Cooperation Works Network.
Any other questions?
About what I'm fearful.
All right.
Could you talk on like cooperative health insurance? Have you seen anyone do that successfully or?
We're not letting out the state here.
You know, that one's say a bit out of my wheelhouse. There are a couple of I'm gonna not have any of the names off the top of my head, but I will direct you to a couple of things. I know that there is a health insurance provider that's on the Co-op 100. It's probably not exactly what you're looking for. And I know less about this side of things. I do know I forget the town. I'm gonna have to look it up. I'm pretty sure it's a small town in Wisconsin. There was a hospital that closed, maybe two hospitals that closed, and they actually ended up reopening as cooperatives. And it's really critical, right? In a rural area, because it's hospital. That's a big deal if you have to go, 50, 90, 100 miles for healthcare. So I can try to remember the name of that. It's not at the top of my head. And then this is a little bit different, but it's sort of an example actually of it is an example of the importance of networks. The U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives understands that a lot of the worker co-ops that are members, so worker co-ops, they're the fastest growing cooperative sector, but they are also the smallest, and a lot of them tend to be pretty small businesses. I think the average worker co-op, if I have my stats up to date, is maybe 11 worker owners. So pretty small, and that means that they can have a lot of trouble accessing health insurance plans. Means that they can have trouble accessing retirement plans. And so one of the things that the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops has done over the last 5 to 10 years is, as part of their membership, you can have access to health insurance as a member of their network. And they've recently gotten into providing retirement plans that people can opt into, and it is a benefit of membership. And in fact, I get dental insurance only because not dental insurance. I get my regular health insurance only because of our membership with the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops. Like that's how CW goes through it too. Yeah.
It's about time for us to move on. Any last burning question? Alex will be here. Oh, he's got one. Here we go.
That's one. I'm really curious if you have experience for each state or I don't know, maybe regions if you guys have or folks that you work with have like a legal team or legal go-to person since we all have different policies.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. So what she's referring to is across the U.S., there's not a single cooperative statute. Each state has its own. Some states might only have like an ag marketing cooperative statute. Some have a list longer than my arm. And as I brought up, like California has added one even in the last decade, so it can change. And there is not, to my knowledge, like state by state like that, certainly within our network, but a couple of resources I would point you toward is on the National Cooperative Business Association website. There is a compilation that Megan Moriarty, who was with the USDA, put together of all of the co-op statutes in every state with some information on them. So if you're curious about what's available in Kansas or Missouri or any other state, you can check out that resource. And the Cooperative Professionals Guild also is a nationwide network of lawyers and accountants I don't know if they have it state by state, and I don't know if the list is available to non-members, but if you were curious about who's available in your state, they're a great place to go. And depending on which co-op development center is near you, one of the things they do is provide referrals, so they probably can refer you to a local or statewide lawyer. But it'll depend sort of where you are and what they're specializing in. Thanks for the question.